Hey everybody, I don't know about you, but as you've watched out over the world, the war in Russia and Ukraine is not just isolated to Eastern Europe. It's spread all over the world, and you can see it in market instabilities. You can see it here. People who do not think that that war is affecting you, all you got to do is look at gas prices. You look at your food prices. You see the global change that has happened. But you know something that's also affected investments as well. And I've said all along, legacy precious metals is your navigator. They're the ones that see you through to get to the next level. The good news about this is even with market volatility, market instability, you've got options. And gold prices are rising as investors turn to gold. And gold presents a hedge against this inflation and that protects you against the weakening dollar, which we are seeing. Legacy Precious Metals is the only company I trust to deal with gold and silver and the other precious metals. You need this investment. You need this as part of your portfolio to keep you buffered from what we're seeing in the world, war and volatility in the market. This is where you need to be. Call Legacy Precious Metals today. Be proactive about this. Get on board with it. Call them at 866-528-1903, 866-528-1903, or you can download their free investor's guide at legacypminvestments.com. legacypminvestments.com, your navigator in a volatile world of investments.
Do you want to listen to a podcast?
By who?
Georgia GOP Congressman Doug Collins.
How is it?
The greatest thing I have ever heard in my whole life.
I could not believe my ears.
In this house, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule. It has been said today, where is bravery? I'll tell you where bravery is found and courage is found. It's found in this minority who has lived through the last year of nothing but rules being broken, people being put down, questions not being answered, and this majority say, be damned with anything else. We're going to impeach and do whatever we want to do. Why? Because we won an election. I guarantee you, one day you'll be back in the minority and it ain't gonna be that fun.
Hey everybody, it's Doug Collins here on the Doug Collins Podcast. Glad to have you back. Today, I was sitting here thinking over the past few weeks about education. My wife, as you well know, she taught for over 30 years. The last couple of years, we've made mention a lot on the podcast about what I see as the long-term lasting effects of the very bad policies that were put in place, especially through the pandemic. And how, those students now are going to have to overcome that. We're already starting off getting ready. There's word already put out just the last 24 hours that San Diego school system is going to start off in a mask mandate. We're seeing this, continuation of what I believe is an attack on a younger generation that is being perpetrated at all levels. But where it's being perpetrated the most is what we've gone back to many times, and that is at the teacher union level. And they just had their big convention. The NEA just had their big convention, and you're going to be amazed at what was coming out of this. You would think that they were talking about how do we get kids to learn? How do we catch them up? How do we use tutoring? No, not with the NEA. They're all political and they're all about themselves. So it's glad to have Aaron Withe today with me on to talk more about this. He is, just a leader with Freedom Foundation. He's the CEO. He's been on the podcast before, but I felt, and we'd reached out after this convention, Aaron, they can't hide the fact that their liberal agenda is all they're really about.
Yeah, I mean, you look at both the teachers' unions, the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association. Both of them had their conventions last week. And as you mentioned, they weren't talking about how to educate our kids. They were talking about how to abolish the filibuster. They were talking about masking our kids and critical race theory and sex ed in schools and all the rest of it. I mean, these are liberal institutions today that have nothing to do with educating our children, everything to do with indoctrinating our kids with some liberal talking points. We look back at the conventions back in 2019 at the National Education Association, and on their platform then was critical race theory and defunding the police. You look 3 years later, these are the things that are actually being talked about in the Democratic Party. It's our belief that these teachers' unions are not just the primary funders of liberal politicians, which they absolutely are, but they're also the thought leaders when it comes to creating liberal talking points and pushing a radical agenda.
Well, Aaron, this is not new. I mean, it's sad in two fronts. Number one, it's sad that these organizations represent literally millions of teachers across the country and are indoctrinating them, and they're taking that into the classroom. But everybody needs to remember that one of the first big coming outs for these unions in Democrat politics, and we need to make very clear there, Democrat politics was back in 1976. When most of the delegates to the Democratic Convention, or a great deal of them, for Jimmy Carter, were teachers from these teachers unions. And guess what they got out of that? The Department of Education. So it's sort of, if you can, let's go back for a minute, because we're going to deal with the current moments. But this is not a now moment. This is not just something that happened 2 or 3 years ago. Sort of give our listeners a taste of what that has been like building for the last really 40 years plus in these unions.
Yeah, so what we saw is decades ago, they basically figured out, these government unions figured out that if they could take union dues from public employees, it's completely different in the private sector, but when you can take money from public employees and then use that money to fund liberal politicians that then agree to go into office and do your will, the number one thing they're going to do is grow the size of government so that you can hire more public employees and then take more union dues from those public employees. Ultimately, a government union is a private sector business. Their goal each year is to grow their revenue. The problem with a government union is their revenue grows when government grows. And that's, of course, of extension when taxes grow. So that's the inherent problem with a government union, is they are actually incentivized to go out and elect politicians that go into office to raise taxes. That's the big problem with a government union. You snowball this decades later into 2022, they're the number one contributors to liberal politicians in America. So now you have Joe Biden in the White House, who said he's going to be the most pro-union president ever. You have Congress that has a lot of strings attached to unions' funds, and that translates all the way down to local school boards. It's at the holistic level that these government unions are in control of our politics today.
Well, you just brought up something, and there's a lot that we're going to get into with specific resolutions. I mean, ranging from the national mask and vaccine mandates and other things. But there's one that is, again, you really wouldn't expect the NEA or these conventions to be dealing with. One was the filibuster, but one that was pointed out that was really interesting to me was they were having specific resolutions to deal, or basically stacking the decks in the local school boards, because they're so concerned about what we saw in the last 18 months with parents. All of a sudden, because of being put at home and on Zoom school, basically, they're understanding what their kids are being taught, and the parents are reacting to that. Talk about that a little bit, because I think that's one of the underminers that is very concerning here.
Yeah, I think that if you need to see the power of school boards, look no further than the past couple of years. And in districts where teachers' unions had elected and paid for the campaigns of these school board officials, then those are the worst performing school districts over COVID. These were the school districts that were keeping kids out of school and on Zoom classes. These were the school districts that were masking kids up until very recently. And of course, in San Diego, we'll probably get to it later, are now reinstating that mask mandate. I mean, these are the school districts that are pushing sex ed and all these radical liberal policies. They're the ones that have been put in office by these teachers' unions. But as you mentioned, parents are waking up. I mean, we've recalled school board members in districts that I never thought was even possible. You look down in California, in San Francisco, they recalled the school board members there. So I think that parents are really waking up across America. I think that will continue into the November elections. And look at Glenn Youngkin's race in Virginia. I saw that Virginia race as a reform on teachers' unions. I think that's going to continue across the country, because parents are not going to forget what these teachers' unions and what these school boards have done to their kids.
Well, exactly. And I think that's the issue. I talk about this all the time on the podcast. We talk politics and we talk about everybody. Everybody seems to know, maybe who their congressperson is. They know who their senators are. But you ask them who their school board member is, most people couldn't tell you. And they were the ones that have the direct influence, especially from a public ed perspective. They have the direct input on what is happening in the classroom. And if they're being controlled or they're being manipulated, listened to only from the school union perspective, from the teacher union perspective, then you're going to get a really interesting and sad mix of what the policies coming out. Did you notice, you brought up Virginia, and I'll bring this up. It was amazing to me how the school board members, many who were not teachers themselves, but just elected, sometimes first time, how condescending they were to parents. And I think that played into it a lot as well.
Condescending is an understatement. I mean, when you've got candidates for office going up and saying that the state can take care of your kids better than you can, it's completely ridiculous to undermine what parents have the ability to do. And I think that the other result of that is we've seen a lot of parents take their kids out of public education. They've been putting them into private schools when they can afford them, charter schools certainly. And then we've seen these learning pods pop up all over America as well, which is basically a homeschool community where they get 5 or 6 kids together and go and hire a teacher to educate their children because they wanted to remove their kids from failing public schools. And ultimately, I see what's happened the past couple of years. I call it the grand awakening of parents to what was happening in the schools. I think this is a good thing. I think that ultimately it's going to create a free market economy where parents have the ability to take their kids and put them into schools that are ultimately going to educate their kids. The state could not do a better job than parents of looking after their children, and parents are certainly awakened to that.
Well, and awakening to that, maybe there's also a good part to this as we talk about it here for a second about education, because education, many people and students learn differently. And the thing that has bothered me the most, and we'll jump off of this as far as I think it has opened up the eyes of parents and individuals to their other options out there. But one of the things that was, talked about in these conventions, it's now coming back in San Diego. It's now, I think you'll see far more, jump on this bandwagon here pretty soon about mask mandates and other things coming back into the schools, is at the bottom line, they tend to just move away from science. They tend to move away from anything that would direct them to this. This is more and more about control from the leadership and from the unions and others about working conditions, pay, and how they want to be treated, as opposed to actually what is best for the student.
The left and teachers unions ultimately want control. They don't care about our kids. And, they've talked about following the science for the past couple of years. It's a massive lie. The science has proven over and over again that our kids are basically immune to getting severely sick from COVID. And the science has actually shown that all these measures did nothing to protect kids, and actually their education significantly declined. We spoke about that last time I was on the show, and their mental health is declining far past the rate than any health disparities when it comes to COVID. So if they were actually looking at the science, what they'd be saying is, no, kids need to be in school. They need to be in school full time. They need to be without masks. And ultimately, they need to be actually getting more of an education in those liberal school districts like San Diego, because they're far behind to their peers in school districts that were able to go back into school full time and not forced to wear masks and all the rest of it. You look at the agenda of these teachers unions and the left, it's very obvious to me, and I think it's very obvious to parents as well, that it has nothing to do. They have nothing to do with looking after our kids' best interests.
Right. And unfortunately, I've said this before, and I think you have agreed, it's this, we're not seeing the immediate results. We're seeing it in some slower test scores, and they can write that off as to, coming back. But what we're not seeing is what I believe is going to happen is you're going to see 3, 4, 5 years down the road, some of the basic foundational building blocks for these students, because of issues like these masks and restrictions in Zoom school and others where the students are not able to learn in an interactive format, are going to really take place. And I don't think there's being any preparation for that right now.
No, not in our public schools, not in these liberal school districts, not at all. I think that the results of what we've seen for the past couple of years and what the teachers unions did to our kids, it's going to be measured for decades to come. I mean, you just look at the education disparities and their mental health. My wife's a public school teacher. We've seen it ourselves with the kids that she's been educating. They've been far further back than they should have been to classes that she's taught in previous years. And then you look at the behaviors that are coming across. in the classroom, the kids that they don't know how to interact with their peers. They don't know how to interact with their teachers. I mean, it's a complete tragedy what we've seen the past couple of years with our kids in the schools. And it is a direct result of the teachers' unions and their agenda here. And we're going to see that play out in San Diego. My hope is that this doesn't catch on like it did years ago across the West Coast and into other liberal school districts. But the precedent has been set that it will, and that should concern parents everywhere.
It should. Also, one of the things, and before we get into some of the specifics of some of these resolutions, which I think are just going to, if you've not seen these before, if you're listening to the podcast today, you can go to the DougCollinsPodcast.com. You can download these and other episodes where Aaron's been on with me. But you're going to want to share this, because when you understand what the teachers' unions have done, even in states like Georgia, which are, right to work states, most of the teachers are a member of an affiliate organization, a union per se, Georgia Association of Educators, attached to the National Association of Educators. And we have a group called PAGE, but still act like a union, whether they are or not. They're still having to do this. The one thing, though, that you always hear from them, Aaron, is about the inner city schools, about the poor students. It's about the ones who are struggling. And the reality is that statistics are showing us that these very tactics that they're using are hurting those students more than anyone, but yet they seem to blindly turn their eyes from that.
Yeah, not only blindly turn their eyes, but they actually try and expose this as the reason for why we need to increase taxes in Chicago, for example, or Seattle, Washington, not far from where I'm at right now. In these massive liberal cities where the education has been declining far past the rate than the rural cities, that's where we're seeing teachers' unions want to spend more money. And why would you in these liberal school districts today? I mean, ultimately, they've had power, these teachers' unions, they've had power in these school districts for decades now. They've proven to everybody that not only are they not going to be able to help our kids, but they're actively a hindrance to educating our kids in these schools. And frankly, in some school districts, they're a hindrance to even keeping them safe. This is a problem that is happening. It's creating a difference between these big cities and these rural school districts. And I think that kids are going to be measuring that for years and years to come because of what because one of the teachers' unions have done. So yeah, you're absolutely right. When you look at these big liberal cities, these teachers' unions, that's where they're doing the most damage.
Well, it is, because you'd said it, always follow the money. We started off the podcast with talking about that. But I mean, these, in bigger cities, they have a higher per student ratio of spending than other schools that have much better results and much better education. And it simply goes back to the cost of what the unions are providing. Switching gears here for just a second, Aaron, because one of the resolutions and one of the things that was discussed, which is pretty amazing to me, because if you hear a lot of the left politicians and activists will tell you, why is the right fixated on critical race theory? It's not being taught. It's, they try to take it off. But yet when they come to the conventions, it's a lot of discussion about keeping, not removing, keeping racial equity or critical race theory in the classrooms. What's behind that? What are they hiding?
Well, I think that what they're doing this at these conventions because they now see that most parents across America, they don't agree with critical race theory being taught in their classrooms. They want their kids to be taught reading, writing, and math. So now they're trying to find alternate ways to get it into the classrooms, and they're trying to find other names like racial equity and other feel-good phrases that they can put in there that will hopefully pass the sniff test of parents and be able to get it back into the classrooms. I mean, ultimately, we've seen that when you get into these schools that are actually going out and teaching critical race theory, what they're doing is they're attempting to indoctrinate our kids with liberal talking points. This isn't about race. It's about raising the next generation of liberal voters that are not prepared for the workforce, but are going out and will be their social justice warriors on their issues. Because ultimately, it's not about race in these critical race theory indoctrination settings. It's about their talking points. It's about making sure they're going out and voting for the right candidates. That's the true agenda of the teachers' unions here, is to go out and get these students ready to go out and vote for Democrats. And that should concern parents everywhere, because it's now no longer about getting kids ready for the workforce, which is what education should be, but it's about raising the next generation of liberal voters.
Well, they're hitting exactly what we've seen before in movements of all kinds. If you can train a younger generation without a lot of effort and energy and time, they're going to grow up really that's all that they know. And if they were told from a young age that X is a fact, whether it's a fact or not, they have no other, melting point for it. There's no other post to say, wait, what you're telling me here and what I understand and what my family's taught and what I've seen in other classes is different. And that's the way they've molded this generation, because you're coming more and more in line. You're seeing the poll results of especially our 20-year-olds who's very much more socialist, very much more away from what the founders had set up as our country. You see more questioning of the role of the Supreme Court, more questioning of the role of the three branches of government, that the president, can do whatever he wants to do if it's a Democrat, not a Republican. Do you sense that is also sort of behind not just I like the way you said it's not about race, it's about an ideology.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're not teaching our kids to go in and think critically anymore. They're teaching them how the teachers union wants them to perceive things like the Supreme Court, things like the president, all that type of stuff. They're not teaching them how to think critically about those things. Rather, they're teaching them what they should be saying and what they should be going out and doing, which is one of the major problems. But I think one of the positives that I saw last week come out of one of the teachers' conventions, the American Federation of Teachers, is Randi Weingarten. She's the president of the AFT. She released a poll that said 9 out of 10 teachers thinks that their schools have become too politicized. And that is a key indicator of how teachers are feeling everywhere, because ultimately, like I said earlier, they want to teach reading, writing, and math. They want to teach how kids to get how they want to teach kids how to go out into the workforce or progress through their academic careers. They don't want to do critical race theory or sex ed. So that was an encouraging spotlight for me, seeing that most teachers do not agree with how they've politicized the classrooms. And let's make no mistake, it's the teachers' unions that have gone out and politicized the classrooms. Nobody on the right is going out and saying that we should be politicizing. We should be teaching our kids how to be critical thinkers, not these critical race theory and liberal indoctrination centers that they're becoming today.
Exactly. If AFT put that out, if Weingarten actually allowed that to be put out, they had a spin for it, and I'm curious to see what the spin was. Who are they blaming that on? Because they couldn't be blaming themselves, but here they're seeing it. Just curious, who in a rich tradition of Joe Biden, who are we going to blame on this one?
Well, just like everything else, we're going to blame Trump and the rest of the right, of course, for politicizing COVID. That's their claim here, is that the right politicized COVID, and that's what's made our classrooms overly political. I've said it previously. Randi Weingarten, the president, she's an arsonist acting as a firefighter now. That's what she's attempting to do. Is she's created this problem, and now she's acting like she's the one that's going to solve it. No, these teachers unions, they care about politics far more than they do about educating our kids, and their agenda in their convention proves exactly that. That's all they talked about was politics.
Yep. Well, and if you're listening to the podcast today with Aaron with here, and I just wanted to if you say, well, no, they surely couldn't be talking about, surely they're talking about education. Let's just name a few other things that really got under the skin of the teachers unions this year, and that was the Dobbs decision out of Mississippi overturning Roe v. Wade. A lot of discussion about that. Abolishing the Senate filibuster, a big topic that comes up in third grade classrooms all the time. Impeaching the 3 Trump-appointed justices, again, hot topic in the 8th grade civics class, which they don't rarely teach anymore. How can they hide? Or is it just gotten to the point where the media covers for them enough they don't have to hide this this could have been the Democratic Party National Convention and not the NEA or the EFT convention.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, these teachers unions, they've not only become the biggest funders of the left, but they've also become the thought leaders for the left. I mean, ultimately, their goal now is to create the liberal talking points and the liberal platform for the next elections. But I think the benefit, frankly, is that what we'll see in the coming elections is that parents have awoken. They don't see the teachers unions as someone that represents their best interests. And these candidates that are going to go out there on these platforms, my opinion is that they're going to be punished by voters. They're not going to be elected by voters when they go and pursue this radical political agenda. Ultimately, parents, they want their kids to be taught. They don't want to go down these radical liberal talking points. And that's what the teachers unions have become. But as we mentioned earlier, that's the incentive that they have today. They are political institutions. They are the largest funder of liberal politicians in America. And they now see their role in politics as to go out and push the left further to the left.
Well, I've sort of saved the best for last. And this one, again, if you don't believe it's all about them, if you don't believe it's all about and probably even with internally a probably small percentage inside the membership as a whole, the one that caught some attention in the liberal media as well as conservative media was this discussion on replacing in contracts maternity leave with parental leave and mother with birthing parent.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, I'm confused. Where does that fit in?
Absolutely nowhere. I mean, they're trying to become woke. They're trying to replace parents with birthing parents. It's absolutely insane the lengths that they're going to here. But that's ultimately the way that they want to push society. Is they want to push this LBGTQ and all the rest of the acronym off onto regular people that, frankly, they care about educating their kids. Again, they don't care about all of this stuff. All they care about is, how's my kid going to learn to read? How's my kid going to learn to write? How are we going to teach him how to multiply and subtract and the rest of it? It's completely outrageous to think that parents and teachers alike have really any care about the word birthing parent as opposed to mother and father in their bylaws. It's completely absurd.
It is. One last question before we get to Freedom Foundation, because I want to give a moment to say, well, if you're a teacher out there listening, hey, you don't have to continue to give your money to this. But the issue is, why are we seeing? Is it just heightened awareness now, or maybe not, that you see on social media, the TikTok platforms, the other platforms, teachers just brazenly going online and saying, I told my kids today that I am, whatever they wanted to say. And we're talking about kindergartners, first graders, second graders, trying to almost seek affirmation on that frankly would appall most in this country as a very inappropriate discussion for an elementary school classroom, but definitely, but even an inappropriate classroom discussion for others. The teachers, when I were growing up, we respected our teachers. We were like everybody. There was some we liked better than others, and we'd make fun behind our scenes with the ones we didn't. But that was part of. But at the end of the day, we knew our teachers were there for a job, and that was to teach us math, science, reading, social studies, those kind of things. And we respected that. There was a continuation. Why are we seeing this it seems to me all of a sudden over the last few years, this very liberalization, these teachers who are on I will have to say, fringe, going on social media to talk about their sexuality and trying to push that as normal on these kids.
Yeah, it's sick. There's a small portion of these teachers, and I believe it is a very small portion of them, but they're certainly the loudest, that are going out there and creating videos of basically some of the radical stuff that they've been able to put in their classrooms. And the real sick part is that there are other teachers out there almost creating this echo chamber that are tools of the teachers' unions that are going out there and celebrating this. I mean, well, why aren't we celebrating a teacher that got a failing student to go out and pass the next test? I mean, that's what we should be celebrating in our schools. Those are the victories that we should be celebrating. But we've given these people a platform by giving them social media and all the rest of it, and then they're being celebrated by these other teachers for going out and doing that. It's completely sick. But again, I come back to the point of, I think that parents, when they're seeing this, they're becoming awoken to what's happening in these classrooms, and they don't support it. Ultimately, if your kid is in a classroom and you see your teacher in first grade celebrating being able to teach LBGTQ and all the rest of it to their kids, they're going to want to pull their kids out of those classrooms, because that's not what they send them to school for. I mean, maybe some of them do because they feel that public schools have become these liberal indoctrination centers, but most parents don't. And I think that, again, this is going to backfire. The agenda of the teachers' unions is not what parents want. And frankly, it's not what teachers want. We saw that in the AFT poll, and we're seeing it with more and more teachers that are opting out of their unions and stop paying these union dues because they see through this radical agenda.
Exactly. Now look, and for anybody listening out there, as a husband of a 30-year plus teacher, as a brother to a teacher who's been teaching 20 plus years, and my sister-in-law teaches, my other sister-in-law taught. I mean, my uncle. I mean, I've been in a family of teachers. I have nothing but respect for teachers, and very much frustrated with the fact that those who want to do it right are often hamstrung by agendas from Washington and other places that keep them from having the quality time in the classroom that they can have. And this is, I want to talk for a minute here, Aaron. I want us to talk to these teachers out there who are frustrated because they feel trapped. They may be in a state where they're forced, they believe they're forced into their union dues, and others, and even public work employees as well. Freedom Foundation works with that. Talk a little bit, if there's a teacher out there listening today who's frustrated about what they've heard, they see it every day in their classroom, and they want to know maybe what is their way to fight back. How can they do that?
Yeah, so if you're a teacher listening, or frankly, any other type of public employee, the number one thing you can do today is opt out of your union. The average teacher pays about $1,100 a year in union dues. A small portion of that goes to their local union, but the bigger portion goes to statewide unions and the national unions. These are the number one contributors to liberal politicians in America. So if you're paying $1,100 a year into these liberal institutions, you're directly supporting the agenda of the radical left. So you need to go to optouttoday.com and fill out one of our opt-out forms there. It takes 3 clicks and we'll get you out of your union. You have to print out this form. We'll send it into us and we'll send it to the union and make sure that you get out. But that's $1,100 that you've earned that should be in your pockets, and take that out of the agenda of the radical left today. We're seeing thousands and thousands of teachers do it across America. It's something it's a movement that's happening all over the country. And I'd encourage any teacher listening today to be a part of that movement.
And you're not alone out there. If you're listening and say, well, I don't want to be by myself, 2% of the entire membership they've lost in these unions over the last little bit. But I'll bring up the other one. One of the obvious reasons that many stay in is for their liability insurance, their protection. How do you talk to them about that?
Yeah, sure. So the unions do provide some supplemental liability coverage. Actually, the first line of defense when it comes to liability coverage is usually the school district, but they can actually decline to represent you. So can the teachers' unions. So there's very few ways to guarantee that you get that coverage. One group that we work with is the Association of American Educators, AAE. They're a national group that we partner with. They provide liability coverage, double the amount of the teachers' unions, and they will represent 100% of their clients. My wife's a member. It's around $18 a month to be a member, far significantly lower than the amount of union dues and far better coverage. So we like to help teachers that have that concern to go to AAE and join up with them and get out of the teachers' union.
And Aaron, I think just bringing this, the more we highlight this, the more I think sunshine is actually going to help this situation with the unions, with our school system. And that if you're having a school system that's coming back and putting these really callous, very backwards, at this point, mask mandates and even, as much as, rotating again on Zoom and others, you're going to have the material to go back and say, look, we don't want this, and be able to confront. And I think you're going to see more confronting of that as we go. Is it optout.com? Is that where they need to go?
optouttoday.com. And then for anyone that's interested in what we do at the Freedom Foundation, freedomfoundation.com, sign up to our emails, subscribe to our social media channels, so that you can share some of the content that we're doing with your fellow peers as well.
All right. So for everybody, Aaron Withe with us today from the Freedom Foundation. I mean, just discussing what's going on in one of the most important places in our country, and that is in our schools. We've talked about our military. We've talked about our government. We've talked about a lot of things on this program. But when it comes to our schools and educating our young people, that is the absolute, biggest concern we should have. And there are a lot of options out there for parents, not just the traditional public school. You have home schools, you have pods, you have private schools, you have parochial schools, charter schools. There's a lot of options out there. But I think now what we've seen, and I know from talking from you and listening from your feedback and comments, that we're seeing that parents are becoming much more, again, involved in their children's education. You need to have this information. If you have any comments, go to the DougCollinsPodcast.com, the DougCollinsPodcast.com. I have a place there where you can email me. Love to hear your feedback. And if you get this, please share it with your groups, maybe through your PTAs, your others, just your family groups. Let them hear what's actually going on. Many of them may not know what's happening, and gives them the tools they need to confront maybe what they're seeing in their schools back home. You can share this link wherever you get your podcast. Make sure that you share it. Put it in an email. Say, hey, I was listening to this on the Doug Collins podcast. Wanted you to hear it. In Freedom Foundation, go to their website. Listen to what we've just said, because these are things that matter as we go forward, because it's about the next generation that we're fighting for. That's all we got today here on the Doug Collins podcast. We'll see you again soon. Hey, everybody. I just want to talk about sleep. You know why I want to talk about sleep? It's because I just got out from underneath my MyPillow bed sheets and my pillow that I keep under my head every night, because I like to sleep on my side. I like to sleep on my back. I like to sleep, I move at night, and MyPillow is just the best thing that goes under my head. It keeps me getting restful sleep. The sheets are amazing. It's just what you need. Everybody understands you need 7 hours of sleep. Why not sleep in some of the best products out there? And Mike and the folks at MyPillow are great folks to do this with. And you can go to mypillow.com, or you can call them at 800-564-8475. Use code word Collins, Collins. You won't want to miss this. If you have not got these Giza bed sheets, you need them. They're amazing. They're soft. They don't wear out. You need those to get that sleep against your body at night and provide that cooling, just soothing nature that lets you get the most sleep. But they're not just about bed sheets and pillows. They also have the My Slippers. Amazing. I've talked to you about it before. I don't wear slippers, but I do wear My Slippers. They're amazingly comfortable. You can wear them outside. You can wear them inside. Great products. You've got towels. You've got all kinds of stuff. Go to mypillow.com. It's spring cleaning time. It's springtime to get out there and try and buy new things. Replace some of your old stuff. You'll want to replace your towels. Get some other products for your bedroom. All at mypillow.com. mypillow.com, or call 800-564-8475. Use the promo code Collins, Collins, when you check out. I guarantee you will be satisfied.